The grand hall of the imperial palace stretched high above, its towering walls covered in gold that shimmered faintly under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Each step echoed softly on the polished marble floor as people moved about, their whispers filling the air like a distant hum. At the center of it all sat Ryan, the Emperor, his presence commanding and unyielding. His robes were heavy with intricate designs, threads of silver and crimson woven into patterns that seemed to dance in the dim light. He was not just any ruler. He governed an empire that spanned across stars, where humans were seen as lesser beings, weak, fragile, and unworthy of respect. Ryan leaned back slightly in his throne, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest. Despite his calm exterior, his mind buzzed with thoughts. Advisors had often warned him about underestimating Earth's inhabitants, but Ryan dismissed their concerns as unnecessary worry. Humans were nothing more than a footnote in the history of his vast dominion. Yet today, something unusual had caught his attention. A report claiming that one human woman had outperformed several elite soldiers during a combat simulation held by rebel factions on Mars. It was hard to believe, almost laughable, but curiosity tugged at him nonetheless. He called for her to be brought before him. If this human truly possessed skills worth noting, he wanted to see them for himself, and perhaps remind her of her place in his empire. The thought amused him slightly, though he didn't let it show on his face. A smirk would only undermine the seriousness of his position. Minutes later, the heavy doors of the hall swung open, revealing Emma flanked by two guards dressed in sleek black armor. Her arrival silenced the murmurs of the court, drawing all eyes toward her. She walked steadily, her steps measured and confident despite the imposing surroundings. Clad in simple clothing, she carried no weapons, no armor, nothing that suggested she belonged in such a place. Yet there was something about her, an aura of quiet strength that made even the most skeptical observers pause. Emma stopped a few paces away from the throne and knelt gracefully, lowering her head as protocol demanded. Her dark hair framed her face, and her piercing blue eyes scanned the room briefly before settling on the floor. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some mocking her appearance, others speculating about what she might do next. Ryan listened to none of it. Instead, he studied her carefully, noting how she held herself, calm, composed, and without fear. "Rise," Ryan said finally, his voice deep and commanding, cutting through the noise like a blade. Emma obeyed, rising smoothly to her feet. She stood tall, meeting his gaze directly. There was no trace of hesitation in her expression, no sign of intimidation. This intrigued Ryan. Most humans who came before him cowered or stumbled over their words, eager to prove their loyalty or beg for mercy. But Emma was different. She exuded a quiet confidence that bordered on defiance, and it fascinated him. "You are the one they speak of?" Ryan asked, leaning forward slightly. His tone was sharp, probing. "The human who bested my warriors in a simulated trial?" Emma nodded once, her movements deliberate. "I am." A low murmur swept through the hall, a mix of disbelief and mockery. Some laughed outright, unable to fathom how someone so unremarkable could achieve such a feat. Others exchanged skeptical glances, clearly expecting her to fail miserably when put to the test. Ryan raised a hand, silencing the chatter instantly. He turned to one of his advisors standing nearby. "Bring Daniel," he ordered. Moments later, a figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the hall. It was Daniel, Ryan's most trusted warrior and a symbol of perfection within the Empire. Tall and muscular, he radiated power and skill. His reputation preceded him. Many considered him unbeatable in combat. As he approached, the crowd parted respectfully, creating a clear path between him and Emma. Daniel stopped a few feet away, his lips curling into a cocky grin. He unsheathed his plasma blade, the weapon emitting a soft hum that resonated through the hall. The light from the chandeliers reflected off its surface, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Without waiting for further instruction, he gestured toward Emma, inviting her to choose a weapon. Emma glanced at the rack nearby, filled with an assortment of blades, staffs, and other tools designed for combat. She stepped forward, her movements unhurried, and selected a short training staff. It was plain and unassuming, lacking the lethal edge of Daniel's blade. The choice drew immediate laughter from the audience, their amusement evident. To them, it was already clear how this would end, with Emma humiliated and defeated. But Emma paid no heed to their jeers. She returned to her position, gripping the staff firmly in both hands. Her posture shifted slightly, becoming more focused, more alert. There was no arrogance in her stance, only readiness. Ryan watched intently, his interest piqued. Something told him this wouldn't be as straightforward as everyone assumed. "Begin," Ryan commanded, his voice ringing out like a gong. Daniel wasted no time. With a swift motion, he lunged forward, his blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. The crowd cheered, anticipating a quick victory, but Emma moved like water, sidestepping the attack effortlessly. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, as if she could read Daniel's intentions before he acted on them. Every strike he aimed missed its mark, leaving him increasingly frustrated. Confusion flickered across Daniel's face as he tried again, and again, each attempt met with failure. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, his confidence wavering. Meanwhile, Emma remained calm, her breathing steady, her focus unbroken. Then, in a flash, she struck. With a single decisive blow, she disarmed Daniel, sending his blade clattering to the floor. Before he could react, she swept his legs out from under him, forcing him to collapse onto his knees. The hall fell silent, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Gasps and murmurs replaced the earlier laughter, disbelief etched on every face. Even Ryan found himself leaning forward in his throne, his brow furrowed in thought. Emma stood victorious, her expression unreadable, her staff still poised in her hands. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ryan broke the silence. "Enough," he said, his voice firm but tinged with something akin to admiration. "You have proven your skill." Emma lowered her staff, her gaze never leaving the Emperor's. Though she had won, there was no triumph in her eyes, only resolve. Whatever game Ryan intended to play, she was ready. And deep down, Ryan knew this encounter was only the beginning. After the duel, the grand hall buzzed with tension. The crowd slowly dispersed, their murmurs fading into the background as Ryan dismissed them with a wave of his hand. He sat back in his throne, his sharp eyes fixed on Emma, who still stood, in the same spot, her expression calm and unreadable. Daniel had already been escorted away, his pride bruised but his loyalty to Ryan unwavering. For now he was out of sight, but Ryan knew he would recover quickly from the humiliation. Ryan leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice cut through the lingering silence. "You are not what I expected," he said, his tone measured but laced with curiosity. "Why did you come here? Why risk stepping into my palace?" Emma hesitated for a moment, her gaze steady as she met his. She didn't flinch under his piercing stare. "I came because I thought your people might listen," she replied, her voice clear and firm. "I wanted to show you that humans aren't all weak or insignificant, but now I see how wrong I was." Her words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Ryan studied her carefully, searching for any sign of deceit or fear. He found none. Instead, there was a quiet defiance in her stance, a subtle challenge to his authority. It intrigued him, though he wouldn't admit it aloud. Deep down, he admired her courage, even if it went against everything he believed about humanity. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy but charged with unspoken questions. Finally, Ryan broke it. "You have skill," he said, leaning back in his throne, "skill that could be useful to me." Emma frowned slightly, her grip tightening on the staff she still held. "Useful how?" she asked, her tone cautious. Ryan ignored her question for a moment, his thoughts racing. Humanity's resistance against his empire had grown bolder in recent months. Reports of rebel activity were pouring in daily, each one more alarming than the last. They were planning something big, something that could destabilize his rule if left unchecked. Ryan needed someone resourceful, someone capable of infiltrating their ranks and uncovering their plans. Someone like Emma. "You will work for me," Ryan declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. "In exchange, I will grant you protection for yourself and your kind." Emma's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. She didn't trust him, and he could see it in the way her jaw tightened. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the question. Ryan smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "Refusal is not an option," he said simply. "But consider this. Working for me gives you a chance to protect your people. Defy me, and I will crush them without hesitation." The threat was clear, but so was the opportunity. Emma weighed her options carefully, her mind racing. Refusing would mean certain death, not just for her, but for countless others. Accepting, on the other hand, offered a chance to turn the tables on the Empire, a chance to fight from within. Finally, she nodded once, her decision made. "Fine," she said, her voice firm. "But don't expect me to grovel." Ryan chuckled softly, amused by her boldness. "I wouldn't dream of it," he replied. "Now follow me. There is much to discuss." He rose from his throne and gestured for her to accompany him. Together they walked through the palace corridors, their footsteps echoing against the marble floors. The guards stationed along the walls watched them pass, their expressions unreadable. Emma kept her focus ahead, refusing to let the opulence of the palace distract her. She had a mission now, one that required all her attention. They entered a private chamber, its walls lined with holographic displays showing maps of star systems and troop movements. Ryan motioned for Emma to sit at the table in the center of the room, but she remained standing, her posture unwavering. He didn't press the matter, instead activating one of the displays with a flick of his wrist. "The rebels are growing stronger," Ryan began, his tone serious. "Their attacks are becoming more coordinated, more strategic. We suspect they are planning something unprecedented, an assault on my flagship. If successful, it could cripple the Empire's command structure." Emma listened intently, her mind piecing together the implications. "And you want me to stop them," she said, her voice neutral. "Not just stop them," Ryan corrected. "I want you to infiltrate their ranks, gain their trust, and uncover their plans. Once you have the information, report back to me. Do this, and I will ensure your cooperation is rewarded." Emma crossed her arms over her chest, her expression thoughtful. "It won't be easy," she said after a moment. "They won't trust me right away. And if they find out I'm working for you, they'll kill me." Ryan nodded, acknowledging the risks. "True," he admitted, "but you've proven you're resourceful. Use that to your advantage. And remember, failure is not an option." Emma didn't respond immediately. She stared at the holographic map, her mind racing with possibilities. This was a dangerous game, one that could cost her everything, but it was also an opportunity, a chance to protect her people and perhaps even weaken the Empire from within. Finally, she looked up at Ryan. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "But I work alone. No interference from your side." Ryan considered, her demand for a moment before nodding. "Agreed," he said. "But know this, if you betray me, there will be consequences." "I understand," Emma replied, her tone resolute. With that, Ryan handed her a small device, no larger than a coin. "This will allow you to communicate with me when necessary," he explained. "Keep it hidden and use it wisely." Emma took the device and slipped it into her pocket without hesitation. She didn't thank him. There was no gratitude in her actions, only determination. As she turned to leave, Ryan called out to her. "One more thing," he said, his voice low. "Don't underestimate them. The rebels are desperate, and desperation makes people dangerous." Emma glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "So do I," she said simply, before walking out of the chamber. The journey to the rebel stronghold was long and arduous, filled with moments of tension and uncertainty. Emma traveled light, carrying only the essentials as she navigated through enemy territory. She avoided patrols and surveillance drones, relying on her instincts and training to stay hidden. By the time she reached the outskirts of the rebel, base exhaustion clung to her like a second skin, but she pushed through it knowing she couldn't afford to falter now. The base itself was a maze of tunnels and makeshift shelters carved into the rocky terrain of a desolate moon. Emma approached cautiously, her senses on high alert. She spotted a group of rebels patrolling the perimeter, their weapons drawn and ready. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into view, raising her hands to show she was unarmed. "Who are you?" one of the rebels demanded, his voice gruff and suspicious. "My name is Emma," she replied calmly. "I'm here to join your cause." The rebels exchanged wary glances, their distrust evident. One of them, a tall man with piercing green eyes, stepped forward. "Why should we believe you?" he asked, his tone sharp. Emma met his gaze without flinching. "Because I've seen what the Empire does to people like us," she said, her voice steady. "And I'm tired of running." The man studied her for a long moment, before nodding. "Follow me," he said finally. "But make no mistake, if you're lying, you won't live to regret it." Emma followed him into the base, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. She knew gaining their trust wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For now, she had taken the first step into a world of danger and deception, one that could change the fate of humanity forever. Emma stepped into the rebel base, her senses sharp as she took in her surroundings. The tunnels were dimly lit, their walls rough and uneven, carved hastily into the moon's surface. The air was cool, but carried the faint metallic tang of machinery and sweat. Rebels moved about with purpose, some tending to weapons, others huddled over maps spread across makeshift tables. Despite the chaos, there was an underlying sense of order, a fragile balance held together by shared purpose. The man, who had escorted her inside, stopped near a group gathered around a central chamber. He turned to face her, his piercing green eyes narrowing slightly. "Wait here," he said, his tone clipped. Without another word, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Emma standing alone. She used the moment to observe. The rebels were a mix of humans and other species, their faces hardened by years of struggle. Some bore scars, physical reminders of battles fought and survived. Others carried themselves with the weight of loss, their expressions grim but determined. Emma knew she had to tread carefully. These people didn't trust easily, and earning their confidence would take time. Minutes later, the man returned with another figure, a woman named Alex. She was shorter than most of the rebels, with dark hair tied back in a tight braid and a lean build that spoke of agility and strength. Her presence commanded attention, her movements deliberate and confident. She stopped a few paces away from Emma, arms crossed over her chest. "So you're the one claiming to want to join us," Alex said, her voice sharp but not unkind. It wasn't a question, but Emma answered anyway. "Yes," she replied, meeting Alex's gaze without hesitation. "I've seen what the Empire does. I want to fight back." Alex studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. "We'll see if your actions match your words. Follow me." Emma obeyed, trailing behind Alex as they moved deeper into the base. They arrived at a small room where supplies were stored. Weapons, ammunition, and basic gear lined the shelves. Alex handed Emma a blaster rifle and motioned for her to follow. They walked to a training area, a wide cavern filled with targets and obstacles. "Show me what you can do," Alex ordered, stepping back to watch. Emma didn't hesitate. She raised the rifle, aiming quickly at the nearest target. With precision, she fired, hitting the mark dead center. She moved to the next target, then the next, each shot landing exactly where it needed to. When she finished, she lowered the weapon and turned to face Alex, who wore a faint smirk. "Not bad," Alex admitted grudgingly. "But skill alone doesn't earn trust. You'll need to prove yourself in real combat." Over the following days, Emma threw herself into the work. She trained alongside the rebels, learning their tactics and adapting to their methods. She helped repair equipment, scouted nearby areas for resources, and even assisted in defending the base during surprise raids by Imperial forces. Slowly but surely, she began to earn their respect. Despite her efforts, however, suspicion lingered. Alex kept a close eye on her, often questioning her motives or testing her loyalty. Emma endured it all, knowing she couldn't afford to slip up. At night, when the base grew quiet, she replayed every interaction in her mind, searching for any misstep that might expose her true mission. The pressure weighed heavily on her, but she refused to let it break her. One evening, while sitting near the edge of the base, Emma found herself approached by Alex. The rebel leader sat down beside her, her expression thoughtful. "You're different from the others," Alex said after a moment of silence. "Most recruits come here angry, looking for revenge. But you seem focused, almost too calm." Emma tensed slightly but kept her voice steady. "I have my reasons," she replied. "Reasons I don't share lightly." Alex nodded slowly, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "For now." "Just remember," she said, standing up, "we're all counting on each other. Betrayal isn't something we tolerate." As Alex walked away, Emma exhaled quietly, relieved that the conversation hadn't gone worse. But Alex's words stayed with her, a reminder of how precarious her position truly was. Weeks passed, and Emma dug deeper into the rebels' plans. Through careful observation and subtle questioning, she pieced together fragments of information. Their ultimate goal became clear: a coordinated attack on Ryan's flagship designed to cripple the Empire's command structure. It was bold, risky, and, if successful, potentially devastating. Emma knew she had to act. Using the small communication device hidden in her pocket, she sent an encrypted message to Ryan, relaying key details of the plan. But as she typed out the information, doubt crept into her mind. If the attack succeeded, countless lives would be lost, not just Imperial soldiers but civilians caught in the crossfire. Yet stopping it entirely would only prolong the suffering under Ryan's rule. In the end, Emma made a decision. She altered critical parts of the plan before sending it, ensuring the assault would focus on disabling rather than destroying. It was a gamble, one that required absolute precision. If Ryan followed her revised strategy, casualties could be minimized. If not, the consequences would fall squarely on her shoulders. The day of the planned attack arrived, tension thick in the air. The rebels prepared with quiet determination, checking their weapons and reviewing strategies. Emma stood among them, her heart pounding as she watched Alex give final instructions. "This is our chance," Alex said, her voice firm. "A chance to strike back at the Empire and show them we won't be silenced. Stay sharp, stay focused, and remember why we're doing this." Emma nodded along with the others, though her thoughts were elsewhere. She had done everything she could to steer the outcome toward peace, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. As the rebels boarded ships bound for the flagship, she joined them, taking her place quietly among the crew. The journey to the flagship was tense, every second stretching endlessly. When they arrived, the battle began immediately. Explosions rocked the ship, alarms blaring as Imperial forces scrambled to respond. Emma fought alongside the rebels, her actions calculated to protect rather than harm. She disabled enemy weapons, whenever possible, avoiding lethal strikes unless absolutely necessary. Amidst the chaos, she spotted Alex leading a team toward the command center. Emma followed, her pulse racing. She knew this was the moment everything would hinge on, whether her altered plan would hold or crumble under the weight of reality. When they reached the command center, Alex turned to face Emma, her expression fierce. "You've proven yourself in battle," she said, "but this is where it matters most. Are you with us?" Emma hesitated, the weight of her choice pressing down on her. Finally, she nodded. "I am," she said, her voice steady. "But listen to me, we don't have to destroy everyone. We can end this without more bloodshed." Alex frowned, clearly torn between anger and curiosity. Before she could respond, Imperial reinforcements arrived, surrounding them. Emma stepped forward, raising her hands in a gesture of surrender. "Enough," she said loudly, her voice cutting through the noise. This has gone far enough. For a moment, no one moved. Then, to Emma's relief, Alex lowered her weapon slightly, signaling her team to stand down. The rebels exchanged confused glances, but they obeyed, trusting Alex's judgment. As the dust settled, Emma realized the hardest part was yet to come. She had planted the seeds of compromise, but whether they would take root remained uncertain. Still, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this could be the beginning of something new, a chance to rewrite the story of humanity and the Empire. The command center of the flagship was a scene of controlled chaos. Smoke curled from damaged consoles, and sparks rained down from shattered lighting panels. The air smelled of burning metal and sweat, thick enough to choke on. Imperial soldiers stood at the edges of the room, their weapons trained on the rebels who had managed to breach the heart of the ship. Emma stood in the middle of it all, her hands raised in surrender, her expression calm despite the tension crackling around her. Alex glared at her, betrayal flashing in her eyes. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp and edged with anger. "Are you working for them?" Emma didn't flinch. She turned slowly to face Alex, her gaze unwavering. "No," she said firmly. "I'm trying to save lives, yours, theirs, everyone's. If this fight continues, no one wins. Can't you see that?" Alex hesitated, her weapon still pointed at Emma but trembling slightly. The other rebels exchanged uncertain looks, their loyalty to Alex warring with the realization that she might be right. For weeks they had trusted Emma, fought beside her, and seen her skill and determination firsthand. Her sudden actions now left them questioning everything. From across the room, Ryan stepped forward, his towering figure commanding attention. He moved with deliberate calm, his dark robes trailing behind him as he surveyed the scene. His sharp eyes landed on Emma, studying her carefully before addressing Alex. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice deep and authoritative. "Your attack has failed." Alex's jaw tightened, her grip on her weapon tightening as well. "We're not giving up," she shot back, defiance blazing in her tone. "You've oppressed us for too long. We won't stop until we're free." Ryan's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something Emma couldn't quite place. It wasn't fear or anger, but perhaps doubt. For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of his presence pressing down on everyone. Emma seized the opportunity. "Listen to me," she said, her voice rising so it carried across the room. "This isn't about winning or losing anymore. It's about finding a way to stop the cycle of destruction. If we keep fighting like this, nothing will change. People will die, and for what? More hatred, more pain." Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Slowly, Alex lowered her weapon, though her glare remained fixed on Emma. "And why should we trust you?" she asked bitterly. "How do we know this isn't some trick?" "Because I've been where you are," Emma replied, her voice softer now but still strong. "I know what it feels like to hate the Empire, to want revenge. But revenge doesn't solve anything. It only creates more suffering." For a long moment, no one spoke. The rebels looked at each other, uncertainty written on their faces. Finally, Alex nodded reluctantly. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "But if this is a trap, you'll answer for it." Ryan watched the exchange silently, his thoughts hidden behind an unreadable mask. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured but firm. "Enough blood has been spilled today," he declared, stepping further into the room. "There will be no executions, no retaliation, for now. Instead, we will talk." The statement shocked everyone, including Emma. She hadn't expected Ryan to agree so readily, especially given his reputation for ruthlessness. Yet there was a shift in him, subtle but undeniable. Perhaps her actions and her words had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. The negotiations took place in a smaller chamber, its walls lined with holographic displays showing maps and data. Ryan sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid but his expression thoughtful. Across from him sat Alex, flanked by two of her most trusted advisors. Emma stood near the edge of the room, her presence acknowledged but unspoken. She was neither fully rebel nor imperial, caught between two worlds that had long been at odds. Ryan began the discussion, his voice calm but commanding. "Your rebellion has cost my empire dearly," he said, his gaze sweeping over the rebels. "But I am willing to consider terms if you can prove your intentions are genuine." Alex leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table. "Our intentions have always been clear," she countered. "We want freedom, we want justice, and we want an end to your tyranny." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Freedom and justice are noble goals," he admitted. "But how do you propose to achieve them without plunging both sides into further chaos?" It was a fair question, one that forced Alex to pause and think. For years, the rebels had focused solely on resisting the Empire, their plans driven by anger rather than strategy. Now, faced with the possibility of peace, they had to reconsider their approach. Emma stepped forward then, breaking her silence. "Both sides have suffered," she said, her voice steady. "The Empire has ruled through fear and the rebels have fought through desperation. Neither path leads to lasting change. What we need is balance, a way to coexist without oppression or violence." Her words resonated with everyone in the room. Even Ryan seemed to soften slightly, his usual stern demeanor giving way to something resembling reflection. He glanced at Emma, his expression unreadable, before turning back to Alex. "Very well," he said after a moment. "Let us begin drafting terms for a truce. But know this, if either side breaks the agreement, the consequences will be severe." Alex nodded, though her suspicion remained evident. "Agreed," she said curtly. "But don't think this means we trust you." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Ryan replied, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Over the next several hours, the discussions continued, each side presenting their demands and concerns. The process was slow and fraught with tension, but progress was made. Emma played a key role, acting as a mediator between Ryan and Alex. Her ability to understand both perspectives allowed her to bridge gaps that might otherwise have widened into chasms. By the time the meeting ended, a fragile agreement had been reached. The Empire would grant limited autonomy to certain human colonies, allowing them to govern themselves under specific conditions. In return, the rebels would cease all hostile actions and work toward rebuilding trust. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a foundation upon which something stronger could be built. As the group dispersed, Ryan motioned for Emma to stay behind. When they were alone, he turned to face her, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "You've done well," he said simply. "Better than I expected." Emma met his gaze, her own expression guarded. "This isn't about me," she replied. "It's about stopping the cycle of hatred. Whether it works depends on both sides keeping their promises." Ryan nodded, acknowledging her point. "Still," he added, "you've earned my respect. Few would have dared to stand between me and my enemies." Emma didn't respond immediately. She looked at him, seeing not just the Emperor but also the man beneath the title, the one capable of listening, of changing, even if only slightly. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice quiet but sincere. As she walked away, Emma felt a mix of emotions, relief, hope, and a lingering sense of unease. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and setbacks, but for the first time in a long time, she believed that peace was possible, and that belief gave her strength to keep moving forward. The signing ceremony took place in the grand hall of the Imperial Palace, the same chamber where Emma had first faced Daniel in combat. The room was transformed, its golden walls adorned with banners of both the Empire and the rebel factions. Representatives from colonies across the galaxy filled the space, their faces a mix of hope and skepticism. At the center stood Ryan and Alex, each holding a copy of the truce agreement. Emma stood nearby, her presence quiet but vital, watching as history unfolded. Ryan stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Today marks a new beginning," he declared, his tone measured but sincere. "A chance to move beyond conflict and build a future where all can thrive." Alex followed, her words sharp but steady. "This is not forgiveness," she said, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "It is a step toward justice, a step we must take together." As they signed the documents, a collective breath seemed to be held by everyone present. When the final strokes were made, the room erupted into cautious applause. It wasn't celebration, far from it, but acknowledgement that something significant had been achieved. The truce was fragile, a delicate thread holding two worlds together, but it was a start. Emma watched silently, her heart pounding. She had played a crucial role in bringing this moment to life, yet she felt no pride, only determination. This was just the beginning, and she knew the real work lay ahead. Trust would need to be rebuilt, wounds healed, and fears addressed. But for now, there was peace, a fragile, imperfect peace. In the days that followed, Emma found herself caught between two worlds. She spent time at the palace advising Ryan on how to implement the truce fairly. He listened to her more than she expected, though his decisions were still guided by centuries of imperial tradition. She also visited rebel strongholds, working alongside Alex to ensure compliance and address concerns. It was exhausting, balancing the needs and fears of both sides. But Emma refused to give up. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens, Emma encountered Ryan. He stood near a fountain, its waters shimmering under the light of the setting sun. For once he wasn't dressed in his formal robes but in simpler attire, making him seem almost human. "You've done remarkable work," he said as she approached, his voice softer than usual. "I underestimated you, and perhaps humanity itself." Emma stopped beside him, her arms crossed over her chest. "It's not about me," she replied, her tone firm. "It's about proving that coexistence is possible. Whether it lasts depends on both sides." Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're right," he admitted. "But change takes time, and I believe you've planted seeds that will grow stronger with care." Emma glanced at him, seeing a side of him she hadn't before. Beneath the armor of authority was a man capable of reflection, of growth. It gave her hope, not for him alone but for the empire he ruled. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for listening." Ryan chuckled faintly, the sound surprising coming from him. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "The hardest part is still ahead." Back at the rebel base, Emma met with Alex in the central chamber. Maps and holograms floated above the table, showing progress on rebuilding efforts and areas where tensions remained high. Alex looked up as Emma entered, her expression guarded but not hostile. "How's it going?" Emma asked, taking a seat across from her. Alex sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "But there's still resistance from both sides. Some rebels don't trust the Empire to keep its promises, and some Imperial officers are dragging their feet on reforms." Emma nodded, understanding the challenges. "It'll take time," she said. "People have to see results before they'll believe in change." Alex studied her for a moment, her green eyes searching. "Why do you care so much?" she asked finally. "You could walk away, leave this mess behind. Why stay?" Emma hesitated, her thoughts swirling. "Because someone has to," she replied simply. "If I don't fight for a better future, who will? This isn't just about humans or the Empire. It's about finding a way to live together without hating each other." Alex didn't respond immediately, her gaze dropping to the maps on the table. Finally, she nodded. "You're braver than I thought," she said, her tone grudging but respectful. "And maybe you're right." Months passed, and slow but steady progress began to emerge. Colonies granted autonomy flourished under self-governance, their economies improving as trade restrictions eased. Rebels transitioned from fighters to builders, using their skills to repair what years of war had destroyed. Imperial forces withdrew from contested territories, allowing local leaders to take charge. Emma traveled constantly, serving as a bridge between the two sides. She mediated disputes, addressed grievances, and worked tirelessly to ensure the truce held. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, times when she wondered if it was all worth it. But then she'd see children playing in rebuilt neighborhoods or hear stories of families reunited after years apart, and she'd remember why she kept going. One day, while visiting a newly liberated colony, Emma stood on a hill overlooking a bustling town. The air smelled of fresh earth and blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the smoke and ash she'd grown accustomed to. Below her, people went about their lives, laughing, working, dreaming. For the first time in years there was hope in their eyes. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to see Ryan standing there, his expression calm but tinged with something close to admiration. "You've changed things," he said simply. "Not just for your people, but for mine as well." Emma smiled faintly, her gaze returning to the town below. "We've only started," she replied. "There's still so much to do." Ryan nodded, standing beside her in silence. Together they watched as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. In that moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift slightly, replaced by the promise of what could be. Emma didn't know what the future held, but she believed in it. For the first time in her life, she truly believed. And that belief gave her strength to keep moving forward, one step at a time.